All right, today we're digging into the latest earnings report for a company called Texas Pacific Land, or TPL. And honestly, hidden inside all the numbers is this wild story about a company that's been around for 140 years, making a huge, and I mean huge, bet on the AI revolution. So let's just start with the central question here, because it sounds kind of crazy. What on earth does a 19th century railroad company have to do with the absolute cutting-edge future of AI? Well, as it turns out, the answer is pretty much everything. So first, you got to understand where this company comes from. Texas Pacific Land, TPL, isn't some new tech startup. Nope. It actually got its start from land grants given to the Texas and Pacific Railway way back in the 1800s. And because of that history, it's now one of the biggest landowners in the entire state of Texas, with a massive footprint right in the Permian Basin, the heart of oil country. Now, you'd think a company this old is just, an old world asset holder. But their latest financial results? Whoa, they tell a totally different story. Let's take a peek at just how good their year was. Get this, for the fourth quarter of 2025, TPL raked in about $212 million in consolidated revenue. That's a record for them, and it blew past what all the analysts were expecting. And here's a detail you're gonna want to file away for later. For the first time in their history, their water business sold over 1 million barrels every single day. Remember that number, okay? It becomes incredibly important in just a minute. And if you look at the whole year, the story's even better. TPL generated a record-breaking free cash flow of almost $500 million. Just incredible. So what's the bottom line here? Well, this company is basically a financial fortress. We're talking record revenue, record income, record cash flow. They have zero debt. They have a $500 million line of credit they haven't even had to touch, and they're still increasing their dividend. I mean, that's what a rock-solid balance sheet looks like. Okay, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Even for a company that's this financially strong, the world around them is changing, and their main market, oil and gas, is facing some pretty serious headwinds. And here's the rub. Over the last year, the price they could get for oil dropped by 15%. But even bigger than that, the number of active drilling rigs in their backyard, the Permian Basin, plummeted by 26%. Fewer rigs just means less drilling, and that's a direct threat to their traditional business. So that begs the big question, right? If your main business is slowing down, where do you go for growth? How does a company with roots in the 1800s manage to pivot and stay relevant? And this is where the story takes that wild turn, because buried deep in their earnings report was the answer. A massive strategic move into one of the hottest sectors on the entire planet, AI infrastructure. Don't just take my word for it. The CEO, Tyler Glover, basically spelled it out on their earnings call. He said that while the main business did great, they also made tangible progress with opportunities in data centers and water desalination. I mean, that's a massive flag waving, signaling a whole new direction. And their first major move is a big investment in a company called Bolt Data and Energy. Now, what makes this so interesting is who's behind it. Bolt is chaired by none other than the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt. Yeah, that Eric Schmidt. Their whole goal is to build these gigantic data centers and the power plants to run them, and TPL is jumping in as their key partner. Okay, so how in the world does this all connect? How does an old land company suddenly become a critical piece of the AI puzzle? Well, the answer lies in the two things they have more of than pretty much anyone else. So let's ask it again, more directly. How do you take a legacy asset from the railroad era and plug it into the absolute bleeding edge of modern technology? Well, the answer is actually kind of simple and brilliant. TPL isn't really changing what it is, it's just changing what it does with its most valuable assets, its ridiculous amount of land, and its incredible access to water. And here is where it all just clicks. AI data centers, the brains behind the revolution, they use an insane amount of power, and they get incredibly hot. To cool them down, you need a staggering amount of water. Well, guess what? TPL has the land for the data centers, the energy to power them, and most importantly, the water to cool them down. And in their deal with Bolt, TPL gets the first shot at supplying all the water for these huge new projects. It's a perfect match. But wait, it gets even cooler. They're not just selling water, they're innovating. They're actually developing this new technology called freeze desalination to treat the water way more efficiently. The idea is to make it faster and cheaper, and they're even looking at using the waste heat from the data centers themselves to help power the whole process. I mean, talk about a smart, self-sustaining boop. All right, so let's zoom out and look at the big picture here. The story of TPL isn't just about whale wells anymore. It's about a fundamental transformation, from railroad tracks to server racks. Here's the key takeaway, the thing you really need to remember. TPL is taking assets that were granted over 100 years ago, just vast, empty land and water rights, and they're turning them into something that is absolutely essential for the most advanced technology of our time. It's an absolute masterclass in adapting to the future. And that just leaves us with one heck of a final thought. We are literally watching a company pivot from the resources that fueled the last century to the resources that will fuel the next one. So the question we're all left with is, could this old, dusty railroad land grant actually become the bedrock for the entire AI revolution in Texas? We'll have to wait and see.